The Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, comparing the battle against ISIS to mistakes that we made decades ago in Vietnam. Here's his quote: "We underestimated the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese and overestimated the will of the South Vietnamese. In this case, we underestimated ISIL and overestimated the fighting capability of the Iraqi army. I didn't see the collapse of the Iraqi security force in the north coming," end quote. He said more than that, too. Mike Baker, live in Phoenix today, former CIA covert operations officer, the president of Diligence, a global intelligence and security firm. And Mike, good morning to you and welcome back here. I don't think you would take exception to Clapper's comment. I guess ultimately the question is, what do we do about it now? But what did you think about his remarks about underestimating ISIS to this point?
Well, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that some people, I think certainly the White House, either underestimated or failed to really focus on, because it wasn't part of their top priority list, failed to focus on the Islamic State. It's an odd time for the phrasing. The navel gazing. I'm not sure that it really helps much. But I think in a sense, he's just trying to put all of this into context at this point. But look, we were getting warnings on the rise, the structure, the motivations of the Islamic State for quite some time from military and intelligence elements. So that shouldn't have been a surprise. And as far as the assessment of the Iraqi army, yeah, I think there was always a happy talk. Every time the cameras turned on, people, whether in the military or in government, would talk about, how capable the Iraqi army is. But when those cameras turned off, I know for a fact, having a lot of conversations over the years, that people were always concerned about the capabilities long-term of the Iraqi army, just like we are with Afghanistan.
Yeah, let's get to the intelligence now, and then I want to circle back on the military approach on this. James Woolsey, former CIA director, last hour essentially telling the administration, wake up and smell the coffee, because now's the time. Woolsey.
That just because the president doesn't want to talk about a war doesn't mean that we're not in one. We are in one, a worldwide one. And the administration goes to great lengths not to say that and not to have the narrative get out of control. But the hell with the narrative. We have to level with one another about what's going on. And we're in a war, a worldwide war, and it's going to get worse.
Wow. Do you think that realization is coming around now or not?
Well, I mean, I think it's a shame that former Director Woolsey has to state the obvious. I think he's absolutely correct. And I mean, look, it was just a few days ago that John Kerry, Secretary of State Kerry, made that odd comment about how we're in this tortured debate over, the terminology of this whole thing. No, we're not. The public and our allies, they understand we're in a war. Apparently the White House is having a tortured debate of terminology. But, this has been going on for years. And I think part of the problem is now with the headlines of the Islamic State has been grabbing as they've been gaining territorial integrity. And that has focused us again from a period of time over the past handful of years where we've just become fatigued and weary about the whole thing. And so now, it's almost like we had our heads snapped back to reality because of what has happened with the Islamic State. But, all these threats, whether it's Al-Qaeda or Islamic State, it's all coming from that same source. It's all coming from extremism, from jihadists. And so but we do need to be practical about it, pragmatic about it.
And maybe the president, that's his intention, to try and figure out a way to find that, how you go after them and do it effectively. At the same time, though, from a military standpoint, you've got 4 significant military leaders in 1 week, maybe over 48 hours. Odierno and Gates and Dempsey, and now James Mattis from yesterday, saying you can't take your options off the table. Here's the man known as Mad Dog on that.
We didn't look for this fight, but once you go into it, you don't tell your adversary in advance what you're not going to do. We have the most skillful, the fiercest, and certainly the most ethical ground forces in the world. And I don't think we should reassure the enemy in advance that they'll never face them.
Well, now, why are they all speaking almost in lockstep? From a military standpoint, you want to keep all your options open. I get that. From a strategic standpoint, that's what you want. All these options on the table, which includes the possibility of maybe a fighting force on the ground at some point. But they all come out at the same time. And these guys have they'd probably tell you, some of them, that they've been given the back of the hand for the last couple of years, and their advice has been ignored and not taken up. Is it possible now that this is their way to say, hey, man, you should have listened to us a long time ago?
Well, I think we're all just trying to walk the dog back from, the White House spending a great deal of time saying what they won't do. And from a tactical and strategic perspective, when you're engaged in a conflict or beginning a war against Islamic State or however we want to refer to it, there's no tactical advantage to saying what you're not going to do. We're not going to put boots on the ground. We're not going to do the following. Just say, look, we have a serious threat to national security, and we're going to take whatever measures are necessary, and then just get on with it. So I think the military is just trying to set the table to say, if nobody else is going to put boots on the ground, and we should be clear about this, somebody has to put boots on the ground, whether it's us, our NATO allies, or our regional allies. If that's not going to happen from our partners, then I think what they're trying to do is set the table to say we may have to do it, because airstrikes alone, in concert with arming and training some muddled mess of Syrian opposition, where we still don't have clarity, along with the Kurdish and Iraqi forces, that's a containment exercise. That's not defeating Islamic State. Somebody has to commit boots on the ground to actually accomplish the objective at the end of the day.
It depends on where ISIS hunkers down, and that's a great point. I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road. Airstrikes can be effective to a point. You can get them on the run, but at some point they're going to stop and dig in. Mike Baker, thank you for your time. Phoenix, Arizona.